There's a question we're all quietly carrying inside of us, whether we're whispering it to a friend, posting it in fragments online, or just staring out a window with that ache in our chest. Where is this world going? What's happening to us? Because if we're honest, there's a lot that feels broken right now. Polarization is loud. Loneliness is louder. We scroll and somehow feel more disconnected than ever. We see suffering on a global scale, wars, displacement, climate disasters. And then we go back to our daily lives, trying to carry the weight of a world we don't quite understand anymore. We are not lost. We are in a collective transition. It's a subtle but powerful distinction. When people say the world is falling apart, what they often mean is that the systems and beliefs they were comfortable with are no longer reliable. That's disorienting. It feels like drifting in a storm with no compass, especially when everything around us seems to be shifting faster than we can understand it. But what if what we're experiencing isn't destruction, it's transition? And transitions are, by their nature, confusing, messy, and uncomfortable. They don't follow neat timelines, and they don't care about our craving for certainty. In fact, the very definition of a transition is that something is ending, and something else hasn't fully begun. We're in that in-between space, where we've outgrown the old, but haven't yet stepped into what's next. It's easy to mistake this place for failure. To look around at the chaos, political unrest, environmental crisis, rising mental health issues, the breakdown of trust in institutions, and think we've gone off course. But we haven't. We're being invited into deeper reflection. The world as we knew it, the one that rewarded speed over depth, consumption over sustainability, image over substance, is no longer working for the human spirit. That system was built to serve a certain few, and it depended on many staying silent, compliant, or exhausted. That world, in many ways, is being questioned at its core, and questioning isn't collapse, it's growth. It's awareness waking up, and when awareness wakes up, old stories no longer soothe us, old structures no longer hold us. We start asking better questions about equity, about justice, about meaning, about purpose, and those questions are powerful enough to tear down the familiar, but transition isn't just happening globally, it's happening in our personal lives too. People are leaving jobs not because they're lazy, but because something inside of them is saying, this no longer feels right. Relationships are ending not because people have given up, but because they're no longer willing to abandon themselves to keep the peace. More and more, individuals are choosing truth over tradition, integrity over approval, and that creates friction. When enough people do this at once, it shakes the ground, it unsettles things, and that's what we're feeling. The ground beneath us is shifting, not because we're falling, but because something new is asking to be born through us. We weren't designed to be the same people forever. Evolution is part of our DNA. The world isn't meant to stay frozen in time, even if the pace of change terrifies us. Our discomfort is the evidence that we're not numb, that we're still deeply connected to what matters, that we haven't given up. In fact, if you feel disoriented right now, if you feel unsure or vulnerable or heartbroken, it might be the clearest sign that you're still awake to your humanity in a world that keeps trying to distract us from it. Collective transitions require individual courage. They ask us to sit with uncertainty, to resist the pull of easy answers, and to stay rooted in values even when outcomes are unclear. We're being called to tolerate the ambiguity of not knowing, to sit in the fog without forcing a quick fix, and to trust that something meaningful can emerge from this space. There's a deep vulnerability in admitting we don't know where this is all going, But there's also an immense power in naming that truth, because only then can we begin to imagine something better. When we believe we're lost, we panic, we scramble, we cling, but when we recognize that we're in transition, we can pause. We can breathe, we can get curious, we can ask ourselves what's worth carrying forward and what's time to release. This is the in-between space. This is the middle of the story. And the middle is always the hardest part because it requires us to walk forward without a script, without a guaranteed ending, guided only by the values we choose to hold on to. This era is defined by reckoning, not decline. That distinction matters more than we realize because the stories we tell ourselves shape how we show up in the world. If we tell ourselves that everything is falling apart and there's nothing we can do, we shrink, we disconnect. We become passive observers of our own future. But if we understand that we are in a time of reckoning, a deep, uncomfortable confrontation with our past, our patterns, and our systems, then we realize we are not powerless. Reckoning isn't the end. It's the part where the truth rises to the surface, whether we're ready for it or not. And once it does, we can't unsee it. We can't unknow it. We're faced with a choice: deny it, or do the work of transformation. Reckoning looks like resistance. It looks like protest. It looks like long overdue conversations that leave no one feeling entirely comfortable. It sounds like marginalized voices refusing to stay silent, even when their truth disrupts the dominant narrative. It feels like unease because that's what growth feels like. That unease isn't a sign of destruction. It's a sign of awakening. In many ways, we are confronting the consequences of systems that were never built for everyone. We're reckoning with the stories we inherited about power, about race, about gender, about what success means and who gets to define it. That reckoning is painful, not because we're broken, but because we're finally honest. And honesty always costs something. Comfort, familiarity, illusions. The people who are most afraid of this era are often the ones who benefited the most from how things used to be. That fear makes sense. When you've lived your whole life with the rules set up in your favor, equity can feel like oppression. But for others, this reckoning is a breath of air after years underwater. It's a moment of being seen, being heard, being validated in their pain and truth. The clash we're witnessing is not new. It's just more visible, and visibility brings accountability. This is not the time to numb out or tune out. It's the time to lean in, to pay attention, to stay with the discomfort long enough to learn what it's teaching us. We live in a time where the curtain is being pulled back. Whether it's corporate greed, environmental destruction, systemic racism, or political manipulation, the truths are no longer hiding. They're right in front of us, demanding a response, and that response can no longer be silence. Silence is not neutral in a reckoning. Silence protects the status quo. Silence is a choice, and it speaks volumes, but so does courage. And this moment is asking us to choose courage again and again. To speak up when it's risky, to ask better questions, to question the narratives that feel convenient but incomplete. This era is asking us to confront our biases, to reimagine leadership, to own our complicity, and to engage in conversations that don't have neat resolutions. This is a time when complexity rules. And that can feel overwhelming, but complexity doesn't mean chaos. It means nuance. It means learning to hold multiple truths at once. It means stepping away from the comfort of either slash or thinking and stepping into the stretch of both slash and. We can feel grief and still feel hopeful. We can be angry and still be committed to healing. We can mourn what was and still build what's next. That tension is part of the reckoning. It's where the real work happens. And while we may not have chosen this timing, we are here now, which means we have a role to play, not a perfect role, not a heroic one, but a human one. One that requires presence, humility, and a willingness to keep showing up. The narrative of decline feeds helplessness, but the truth of reckoning invites responsibility. It invites agency. It reminds us that we are not spectators, we are participants. Every small act of integrity, every difficult conversation, every time we choose justice over comfort, we contribute to the shape of what comes next. This era isn't easy. It's not meant to be, but ease was never the point. The point is truth. The point is alignment. The point is becoming a world where dignity isn't negotiable and silence doesn't get to write the ending. Progress without empathy is unsustainable. We've built so much technology that connects continents in seconds, markets that operate across borders, industries that produce at scale, and algorithms that predict what we want before we even know we want it, but somewhere along the way, in the race to innovate and optimize, we lost something essential. We started measuring progress solely in terms of speed, output, profit, and convenience, forgetting that real progress should also be measured by how it uplifts people, how it honors dignity, and how it nurtures the collective well-being of our communities. Without empathy, progress becomes cold. It becomes a machine that runs without feeling, without pause, without accountability. Empathy isn't weakness. It's not a distraction from efficiency or a soft skill to be squeezed into a presentation slide. Empathy is intelligence. It's awareness. It's the capacity to see beyond numbers and recognize the faces, the lives, the stories behind every policy, every product, every system. When empathy is absent, we make decisions that might work on paper but devastate in practice. We design systems that are profitable but extractive, convenient but exploitative, sleek but shallow. We create technologies that connect us digitally while allowing us to forget the humanity of the people behind the screens. We prioritize performance over purpose and speed over sensitivity, and in doing so, we chip away at the foundation of what makes any form of progress meaningful. There's a cost to this detachment. We see it in burnout. We see it in the disillusionment of entire generations who are questioning the very idea of success. We see it in the widening gap between those who benefit from progress and those who bear its burden. The truth is, innovation without inclusion isn't innovation. It's repetition of old patterns in new packaging. Empathy forces us to slow down enough to consider who's being left out, who's being harmed, who's not at the table when decisions are made. And slowing down in a world addicted to speed feels radical, but that's exactly what this era demands. Empathy doesn't mean agreeing with everyone or avoiding conflict. It means being willing to see someone else's pain, their fear, their perspective, and letting it inform how we move forward. It means understanding that every policy has a human impact, every business decision affects lives, every word we choose carries weight. And when we lead, build, or speak without empathy, we end up creating distance instead of connection, resistance instead of trust. We see this play out in public discourse, in boardrooms, in politics, in education. When empathy is missing, people don't feel heard. And when people don't feel heard, they stop listening, they disengage, they resist, and progress stalls. Empathy doesn't slow us down. It grounds us. It gives us direction when ambition alone leads us into noise. It reminds us that we don't have to choose between impact and integrity, between innovation and humanity. We can build things that are both brilliant and kind. We can create systems that are both efficient and fair. But only if we're willing to care, only if we're willing to let the stories of others matter as much as our own. In a time when so much feels divided, empathy is the thread that weaves us back into a shared fabric. It reminds us that the future isn't just something we build. It's something we feel our way into together. We have to stop pretending that hard skills alone will solve the deep fractures of this world. We need courage, yes. We need vision, of course. But more than anything, we need a return to heart. A return to the kind of leadership that asks not just how we move forward, but who we are becoming as we do. Empathy is not a luxury, it's a necessity, because when progress forgets people, it becomes hollow. And when it honors them, even in small ways, it becomes a force for genuine transformation that can actually last. Listening is more powerful than reacting in times of disruption. When the world feels like it's spinning faster, when voices are raised and opinions clash and every headline feels like an alarm bell, our first instinct is often to respond, to fix, to debate, to defend. We rush to assert our stance, to correct others, to make sure our viewpoint is known before someone else gets louder. But in that rush, something gets lost. What gets lost is the space between words, the subtle truth behind someone's frustration, the pain hiding behind the anger, the fear beneath the silence. We miss what people are really trying to say because we're too busy preparing our reply. But listening, deep, intentional, unguarded listening, has the power to slow everything down in the best possible way. Listening doesn't mean agreeing. It doesn't mean staying silent out of politeness. It means creating enough space to let someone else be fully human in front of us without trying to reshape their story, so it's easier for us to hold. It means resisting the urge to correct before we understand, to answer before we absorb, to judge before we reflect. In times of disruption, the noise is overwhelming. Social media platforms amplify outrage. News cycles thrive on speed, not depth. And somewhere in that chaos, we forget how to just sit with one another, how to make room for complexity, how to hold the discomfort of not having the last word. Listening isn't passive. It's an act of presence, of humility, of strength. It requires us to let go of certainty long enough to be changed by what we hear. That's a vulnerable place to be, especially in a world that often equates vulnerability with weakness. But real change doesn't come from clever arguments or sharp comebacks. It comes from connection. And connection only happens when people feel seen, heard, and valued. That doesn't happen in a reactive state. That happens when we pause, when we make eye contact, when we turn toward one another with curiosity instead of assumption. Listening is especially vital when we disagree. When tensions are high and emotions run deep, it's easy to dehumanize the other side, to reduce someone's complexity to a label, a category, an enemy. But when we listen, we begin to see the layers. We begin to understand that even the most opposing view is rooted in some kind of story, in some kind of lived experience, in some kind of fear or longing. That doesn't excuse harm, but it helps us address it with more skill, more care, more intention. Listening gives us context. And context gives us tools to repair, to respond with wisdom instead of impulse. There's a difference between reacting to be right and listening to understand. One creates division, the other creates possibility. In this era where so much feels uncertain and unstable, we need more possibility. We need more of that open space where healing can begin, where ideas can cross boundaries, where people can lay down their defensiveness and find common ground. Listening opens the door to all of that, and yet it requires a kind of bravery we're not always taught. It's easier to perform knowledge than to admit we don't know. It's easier to argue from our side than to explore what someone else truly means. But the most powerful transformations often begin with the words, "Tell me more," or "Help me understand." Or even just sitting in silence and allowing someone else's truth to settle in the room. This doesn't just apply to public conversations or politics. It applies in families, in relationships, in workplaces, in ourselves, because sometimes the person we're least willing to listen to is the one within us. We react to our own discomfort before we've understood it. We push past our exhaustion before we've listened to what it's trying to say. Listening isn't just something we offer others, it's a practice we turn inward as well. It teaches us patience, empathy, and emotional honesty. It teaches us to hold space for the unfamiliar, to sit with what's unresolved, to breathe instead of brace. And in a time where so much of the world feels reactive, choosing to truly listen might be one of the most radical acts we have left. True courage begins with everyday choices and human connection. We often imagine courage as something grand, a public act of defiance, a bold speech, a risky leap into the unknown. But real courage, the kind that shapes cultures and transforms lives, usually doesn't look like that. It looks like telling the truth when your voice trembles. It looks like admitting you're scared and still choosing to show up. It looks like saying no when everyone expects a yes, or saying yes when you know it could change everything. Courage is found in the quiet moments, the private decisions, the ordinary acts that slowly reshape how we live, lead, and love in a world that values image and certainty. Choosing vulnerability is a radical act. It takes courage to be authentic when so much around us rewards performance. It takes courage to prioritize connection over perfection. It's far easier to build walls than it is to risk being misunderstood or rejected. But every time we choose to let someone see us as we really are, we invite them to do the same. And that is how connection happens, not through curated moments or polished presentations, but through honesty, presence, and the willingness to be fully human in front of one another. Courage also shows up in how we treat others. It takes courage to listen with empathy when someone's truth challenges our world. It takes courage to stay in the room during hard conversations, to resist the urge to fix or defend, and simply hold space. In a culture obsessed with being right, it takes extraordinary strength to be kind. Not polite, not agreeable, but truly kind, to look for the humanity in someone, even when their behavior doesn't make it easy. That's the kind of courage that doesn't get headlines but quietly transforms relationships, families, communities. We live in a time where disconnection has become normalized. People go through entire days without feeling truly seen. We move fast, speak fast, consume fast, and we forget that the heart doesn't operate at that speed. The heart needs slowness, needs intention, needs presence, and it takes courage to live that way in a world that pressures us to keep moving, keep producing, keep scrolling. But courage asks us to pause, to check in, to ask a friend how they're really doing and wait long enough to hear the truth, to put the phone down and look someone in the eye, to choose depth over distraction. These are not small acts. These are acts of resistance against a culture of detachment. True courage also includes self-compassion. It's one thing to show up for others. It's another to show up for yourself when you're tired, ashamed, uncertain, or grieving. It takes courage to forgive yourself, to speak to yourself with the same gentleness you offer to others. It takes courage to rest, to ask for help, to admit you're not okay, and in doing so, we create a space where others feel safe to do the same. That's the quiet ripple effect of everyday courage. It doesn't just change how we experience our lives. It changes the emotional climate around us. We keep waiting for leaders to be brave, for systems to change, for something outside of us to shift. But change begins in the choices we make every day. How we treat the people closest to us, how we handle conflict, how we speak when no one's watching, how we stay grounded when everything feels unstable. These moments matter more than we think. They're not preparation for courage, they are courage. They're the building blocks of a world that feels safer, kinder, more humane. When we show up with courage in these small, consistent ways, we start to reclaim the spaces where fear once ruled. We start to remember that we are not helpless, that our presence matters, that love isn't a soft alternative to strength. It is strength in its most powerful form. We are not just witnessing change, we are responsible for shaping it. It's tempting to stand at a distance and observe the world as though we are spectators, to scroll through headlines, absorb the noise, and feel overwhelmed by the scale of everything unfolding around us. But the truth is, each of us plays a part in the direction this world takes. The choices we make, the values we live by, the conversations we have or avoid, the ways we show up in both small and significant moments. These shape the culture we live in. Change isn't something that only happens on grand stages or in history books. It happens in everyday spaces through the way we respond to the people right in front of us in this era. It's easy to believe that influence is reserved for those with platforms, titles, or massive followings, but influence is rooted in impact, not attention. A quiet act of integrity, a decision to hold space for someone's pain, a refusal to dehumanize even when anger feels justified. These shape the emotional landscape of our families, communities, and workplaces. Responsibility doesn't mean carrying the weight of the world alone. It means recognizing that our lives are not isolated from one another. The way we live affects others. The way we lead affects trust. The way we love affects healing. Every interaction is a chance to either reinforce the same patterns or begin to create new ones. Being responsible for shaping change means we have to let go of the illusion that someone else will fix it, that someone smarter, richer, more powerful, more equipped will step in and do the work we're unwilling to do. That mindset delays progress. It keeps us small. It protects us from the discomfort of accountability. But real change demands our participation. It calls us to bring our attention inward and ask hard questions about how we contribute to the very issues we critique. Not from a place of shame, but from a place of possibility. Because if we are part of the problem, we are also part of the solution. We are living in a time of deep division and unrest, but also a time of unprecedented opportunity to reimagine what is possible. Systems are being questioned, narratives are being challenged, old definitions of power are being rewritten. And while that creates uncertainty, it also creates space. Space for new ways of thinking, leading, building, and relating. But nothing new will grow if we remain passive. We must engage with intention. We must be willing to listen more deeply, to learn more humbly, to act more boldly. We must be willing to show up imperfectly and still show up. Being responsible for shaping change doesn't mean we'll always get it right. It means we're willing to stay in the process. It means we apologize when we need to. It means we keep learning, keep unlearning, and keep choosing values that align with a future we believe in. It means we don't wait for clarity to be courageous. It means we understand that progress is rarely linear and almost never comfortable. But it's always worth it when it moves us closer to justice, compassion, and collective well-being. Every moment offers us a choice: to replicate the past or to plant something new. Even in the face of exhaustion, fear, or doubt, we still hold that choice. And sometimes the most radical thing we can do is choose to believe that our actions matter. That the way we speak, the way we care, the way we include or exclude, the way we use our voice, these things carry weight. The future is not some distant place waiting to happen to us. It is being shaped in real time by who we are and what we do now. We are not passive observers. We are the architects of what comes next. The world we're living in is not unraveling, it's evolving. And evolution, by its very nature, is uncomfortable, but within that discomfort lies possibility. We are in the midst of a collective transition, a reckoning that's asking us to lead with empathy, to listen with intention, to act with courage, and to remember that we are not just bystanders in history, we are co-creators of what comes next. True change will not come from fear, reaction, or performance. It will come from the quiet, persistent bravery of individuals who are willing to live with depth, to speak with honesty, and to move forward with humanity at the center. The question isn't just where is the world heading, it's who are we becoming as we shape the path ahead.